Hi, everybody. Welcome to the True Community Gathering on Friday. Why do I never know the date. What is wrong with me? Um, it's August 27th. Is that right? Yeah, it's August 27th.
Yes, it is.
Oh, good Lord. August 27th. Time just speeds by, doesn't it? When you're having fun in COVID. Um, so we've been doing this since April 17th, 2020. And um, a lot of what we've been doing has been exploring how to survive a pandemic. Something that I'm sure that none of us ever planned. It was never on our bucket list, but it's basically been it's been an education. I think that we've spent a year and a half reconsidering our priorities. We're finding new ways to adapt and adjust to new conditions. These are basic life lessons that we all go through in our individual ways. And here we are, suddenly, as a universe, as an entire world, not just a city, not just a state, not just a country, but the entire Earth. We're all being posed with this problem of dealing with a reality that we just never thought was going to be our reality. It's been so different. I think it's been incredibly positive for many people. I think it's been useful. I think it's been a time to think and a time to rethink, and we found ways to be productive. Certainly, this room, the people in this room are a great tribute to how productive the human spirit can be, even when faced with a pandemic and a shutdown. So we've gone through conversations about pivoting. We've gone through conversations about making theater virtual or just making theater during a time when you can't do anything live. And we faced the question of, if it's not live, is it theater? And so many different aspects of this have been interesting and fascinating and educational for us, or for me, hopefully for everybody. Um, we've sort of reached a point now where we thought we were reopening. We thought we were actually going live. We thought that it was, the path was unfurling for us. We were just getting ready to walk down the path, and then Delta struck, and again, we're being tested. Our adaptability is being tested, and most of us are passing the test, I think. Um, I want to commend everybody who is continuing to be creative. I want to commend everybody who has gotten a vaccine. Not everybody's gotten vaccines. And as far as I can tell, I don't like to point fingers, but I have to say that I don't think it's helped the situation much for people that have refused to get vaccinated. Um, but here we are. And I have two guests who have been unfazed by all of this. They've danced through the pandemic. They've continued to be creative, and they've also not. Well, we're going to find out the specifics of it, but we have two people who are producing currently things that are live, performances that are live, and we know something of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Excuse me. And what they're doing and how they're doing it. But I'd like to bring them into the room right now and introduce you to Tandy Beal and Kandie Carle. Tandy, you're in Santa Cruz, is that right?
Mhm.
So you're far away from us, and Kandie is in East Haddam, Connecticut. So all of you in
Yeah.
this room who are New York centric like me, get over it. This is the rest of the country for you. There's things going on outside of New York. That famous New Yorker cover, the New Yorker magazine cover, maybe wasn't so right. Maybe there is life outside of New York. Does everybody know the map that I'm talking about from the New Yorker from many years
Yes.
ago? So, Tandy, say hi to us and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm an old New Yorker, and I took a long time to give up my street creds there and my apartment, which was 65 bucks a month for many, many years on 83rd Street. But
65 bucks a
I
month.
know, how ridiculous. But I am a true Californian now. I actually was born here. Our parents, Tita, who's on the line, we had two actor parents. So I feel like we grew up moving between Hollywood and New York as children a
Your
great
dad
time.
was a movie star.
Yeah.
And John Beal, for those of you who don't know. And if you don't know him, look for his movies. He's terrific.
Mm. Yeah.
So, Kandie, you're from a different part of the non New York of the
Yes.
New York.
Yeah.
And
On purpose.
No, but Tandy, what were you going to say?
well, I grew up in Killingworth, right near Haddam.
Yes, exactly. Right across the river from where I am right now.
Right.
Yes, I'm in Connecticut by choice, on purpose, because I knew that the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to have a movable feast, and I wanted to go from a central location. And I'm 2.5 hours from New York City and 2.5 hours from Boston. So I'm right in the middle. And when I started producing my own productions in the 1990s-ish, it became really clear that while it would be really great to have my own theater space, I was getting much more success producing things that were a movable feast that could go to different venues. So that's really what I focused on for a great deal of time, and still is part of what I do with the Haddam Stage Company. I also have solo shows that I tour with that are living history based, one-woman shows that I have from the 19th century, early 20th century. And since we've got dance in the background, this is something Bob doesn't even know. I have an extensive dance background. I did tons of musicals and all of that, but I'm also part of Polite Society, which is the performance arm of the Vintage Dance Society of Connecticut. And we recreate the social dances from the 1790s to the 1920s in performance, and we lead balls and all kinds of things. So it's really odd that Tandy and Kandie, as well as Tita, have dance in the background. But to your point, yes, I am in Connecticut, and yes, there is life outside of New York City. I did spend some time in California as well, so I get around, and that was on purpose. I didn't want to be based out of one place. I wanted to be able to bring live theater. I do predominantly non-musicals. And I wanted to reach out to a variety of different people who don't, and it's not just for people who don't have the wherewithal to go to the big cities and see theater. It's more about the kind of intimate theater that I wanted to create serves itself better by going out into the community, as opposed to being a bricks and mortar and selling tickets and having people come to me.
Minimal set, maximum connection.
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's hard to, that's our mission statement. And it's really hard sometimes to stick to that, because your creativity, and when you gather really creative people around you, all of a sudden ideas are coming and you want to just go for everything. But editing the bells and whistles is what is, and we distill it down to the essence of what we're trying to do. Storytelling is the bottom line, and how we go about that, and with the minimal set and maximum connection. And
we're going to talk more about specifics. I want to go back to Tandy for a second. Your website says that you. Can I say the year that your company started?
Sure, I don't care.
1976.
Actually,
so you've been doing this a long time.
72.
72? Is that
Yeah.
what I thought it said 76 for some reason, or it just stuck in my head. So you've been doing this a long time. So tell me, what was the evolution of your company? How did you start your company?
Well,
why did you start your company? I can think of many reasons why I would imagine.
You know, I think like many important parts of my life, I backed into them. And leaving New York, I kind of backed into it. My partner had come out here, and I was dancing with the Nikolai Company, and at the end of the summer, he said, I can't go back to New York. And I went, but you have to, I'm not done. So we spent 4 months apart, 4 months together in New York, 4 months apart, 4 months together out here. And then I just found myself staying. And it was a strange choice to make. I was very frightened of living in the wilderness, and yet I realized that this is a home for me, that I see the stars the last thing at night, and that's very important to me. And, you know, I live with having to deal with the raccoons and the deer and the coyote and so on and so forth. So I very much appreciate living in this natural world of here.
This is eye-opening for New Yorkers.
Well, I actually, you know, it's interesting because my sister Tita, who's on here, the two of us moved out of the city at a particular time of our lives. And I think that when you're sick, that your imagination really gets formed by the environment that you're in. And so for me at 6, we were in the wilderness. And I think that's probably why I've come back to this. We have a whole watershed behind us, nobody behind us at all. So it's very isolated here. And yet I have continued to make art here. And I think in many ways, I've been able to have an easier time of it here, although there are no major funders, there's no, you know, there's no media, etc. I think I've been able to do my work in big theaters. I've been able to do projects as I've seen fit out here. And I think it would have been much more difficult in New York.
Okay. People, every time somebody, I send messages to the waiting room every time somebody comes in and says, please make sure your video is off. But I guess I forget to tell them to mute also. So we've had a couple of interruptions, but I want to come back to you for a second, Tandy. Tell me, let's talk about your company. You say you backed into things in life. Things just sort of happen because they're there. What was the purpose of starting Tandy Beal and Company?
You know, I really do feel like I backed into it in the fact that I'm a prolific maker of things. And so I just kept making work, and you evolve in that way. I think maybe in the first 2 years of making work out here, I had always heard a funder won't take you seriously until you've been asking them for about 4 or 5 years. And so I applied to the California Arts Council when it was in its first year, and I was in my first year, and lo and behold, I got a grant. And then I really had to backfill and put the nonprofit in place at the back end.
Was it specifically for dance that you're doing? Let's clarify that.
Yeah, I think that really my home is theater, and I went into dance. My craft is dance, but my home is theater, and my instincts are theater. And at that time, when we went out on the road, we had 3 musicians, 2 actor mimes, 8 dancers. I mean, it was ridiculous. And we would take whatever money came in, and we'd go to a Chinese restaurant. We'd take whatever money came in at the door, and we'd go to a Chinese restaurant and say, make us the best meal you possibly can for these 20 people. And this, whatever it is going to be, $292 or $94. And it was so wonderfully simplistic. Eat art. Let's have a wonderful celebratory meal after what we created together. And we did that over and over and over again.
So let's flash forward a couple of years. What was your company doing? What were the types of performances you were doing prior to COVID, and what happened for you when was your shutdown? Our shutdown was March 12th.
Yes, Austria. We finished a concert on January 20th. That was honoring the music of my partner, John Scoville. And I had brought together Brazilian dancers, Balinese, hip hop, filmmakers, live musicians, a quartet of saxophones. I mean, it was quite extraordinary, the people that I brought together to honor John's music. And it was a fabulous sold out show, really joyful, and then blam.
Yeah.
But it was a great way to shut it down. And all the performers kept writing me notes through the first 6 months going, thank God we had that experience of joy and of doing our craft to full houses and, you know, with joy. Because we got to hold on to this right now because it's very bleak. And
So
that's actually what started me on my path for the next.
What did you do when shutdown occurred?
I think the first thing that I did was I was deer in headlights for probably about 4 months that I just stared. I actually relished the privacy. I relished the ability to just rest. I don't think I've ever rested in my life. And I think that's what I did profoundly. And then I got worried sick about all the artist friends that I have who, if they didn't have a university job underpinning how they were going to get food on the table for their families, I really just got terribly worried about them. And so I thought, God, let's just go out and rent a flatbed truck, trick it out with banners, make it beautiful, figure out how we can make sound, realizing that it's not a great idea for dancers, but I have much work in the music world as well. And so I hired, God, it's a lot of artists. I think it was 69 artists. We've done 104 shows.
So when did this happen though?
I did in October, last year, October, I piloted it and we did it totally pop up. We had no idea how long it was going to take us to set it up, break it down. We would just show up at a park, set it up. And I really was like a barker. I'd go around and see a family there. Oh, you should come over here. There's a free show. And people would come. It was just amazing. And the first day we did 8 shows in one day. We could barely stand up at the end of the day. And then as we formalized it for opening it up in the spring through the summer, we put it down to 5 shows. And now this fall we'll do it at 4 shows a day.
So let me make sure I understand. I have the timeline. You shut down on March 12th with the rest of us. You didn't find any things. You didn't go virtual. I mean, a lot of us decided to use.
Yeah,
virtual.
I did.
Oh, you did.
I did.
Okay.
And I did 3 different kinds of virtual things. I actually myself said, I can't teach anymore. My world of teaching is really hands-on, no pun, but it really is about presence. And I couldn't figure out how to do it online. So, but with people who I hire to teach in the schools, they were okay with it. So we did a whole program called Streaming Dreaming. And I brought in artists who are marvelous artists in San Francisco who would never drive down to a super low income rural school, a 2.5-hour drive to teach 2 45-minute classes. They're not going to do it, but they were able to do this online. It was fantastic. And it gave them an income and it gave children a really diverse spectrum of artists.
So let me just remind our attendees that the main header for this discussion, this conversation today is art and community. Mm-hmm. So you were really doing the work that you were doing to help your community, the community of artists in this case, but you were also doing it to serve, ultimately you wanted to serve a community of audiences that were starved for some sort of entertainment.
And this has been incredible what has happened, because when we first started the truck shows, that people stood
you called it Keep on Trucking, right?
Keep on Trucking. Because I'm a Santa Cruzan, and during the 60s, that was our motto, was keep on trucking. And it seems very much part of what we all have to do, is to just come to terms with how are we going to keep going. And I had a rabbi, she works at Stanford Hospital, and she came, she said, I didn't realize it. She said, I've come to every single truck show. And because I'm in Stanford Hospital, this is the only joy I get each week. I can come out here and dance in nature. Nobody's nearby. I feel safe. And I have great artists there.
Good thing there were no Puritans around.
Well,
that never ends well.
I also love the fact that there was one person wrote us a note and said, I've lived in this area for 15 years. In my and I've never met my neighbors. And now I know my neighbors through the truck thing, because I've been seeing the same people, and I decided I'll go over and talk to them and figure out, oh, how do I know you? So there's that kind of community building that happened that just was a blessing for everybody, I think, in that process.
So I
And
want
then
to turn, I want to turn to Kandie, because you have you have a specialty. Kandie, you have a special area of expertise that people wouldn't automatically assume. You have a tremendous historical knowledge, and you're an historian in many ways, aren't you?
Right. I do a lot of living history programming. I teach acting techniques to living history professionals, first person interpreters. We all do the same thing. We pretend to be someone else, but the terminology is quite different in the living history field. You know, the folks that you come in contact with at Colonial Williamsburg and Mystic Seaport and places like that. Yeah. So I come from a theater background that I morphed into, combining with the living history community to create productions that have elements of both or don't. So yes, I combine all the hats and all the bonnets to do this. And before I forget, because I've been meaning to say this at some of the other sessions, and I keep forgetting, and I made a note for myself, because Tandy was talking about funding, and yes, you have to keep climbing that ladder of pay attention to me, before they'll give you the money. I'm not a not-for-profit, again, on purpose. I am a for-profit, barely, theater company, but what that allows me to do is I have the availability to go through a number of different not-for-profits to create productions that launch there and then go forward. And that's been a great community builder for me with the East Haddam Stage Company.
So can you go into that more? What do you mean that it, by going through a nonprofit, that it can launch it?
Well, for instance, I'll tell you what an upcoming production I'm hoping to do. And I have applied as an independent artist because I'm a sole proprietor. And I can apply for anything that is applicable to an artist, an individual artist. And please remember, all the artistic folks in the room, please remember the humanities are there. And they love giving money to things that are not the stereotypical things that they're usually giving to. I learned that very early on with the living history community, because if I was doing something that was going to be built and produced and launched at a history site, they were very familiar and they spoke humanities speak. They didn't speak arts. So I had to get them up to snuff with the arts grants, and they got me up to snuff with the humanities grants. And so now, as an independent artist, because so much of what I do has an educational or diversity or equity element to it, I can apply for humanities grants for a lot of these productions that are going to be shared with the public. So that's one of the things that I've done countless times. And this upcoming project, actually through True, I met a playwright in Australia, Emma Wood, and she's written a, prior to Pride and Prejudice, how the Bennets got together, the bride, Mr. Bennet and his bride. So as an independent contractor, a sole proprietor, I'm going to go to the not-for-profit Jane Austen Society of North America and reach out to the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut regions. And they're going to be the not-for-profit. I am partnering with them, and so they are going to apply as the not-for-profit for the arts and humanities grants. And this project is one of the things that they are going to apply for money for. And if we get that money, then I'm going to produce this, and it's going to be touring. And the educational element of it, because it's really fun play, is marriage for economics and how that is still relevant in the world today. And that is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, those kinds of partnerships, those kinds of reaching out to your local community, like what you're doing there. The businesses that I have, I've got a whole list of them that I have touched and tapped into over the years, because they want to support the kinds of things I'm doing that has my mission statement, and the fact that I'm trying to use as much what most people outside of New York City, they all say, you know, it's, oh, you're a local. Well,
Kandie, you got a really smart Kandie from Jane Dubin. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a big kudo.
Yeah, well, and it's all in a learning curve. And that's what I really like about True, is the fact that in these meetings and in these community gatherings, I've gotten as much as I'm giving today in information and new ways of thinking about things. And you're absolutely right. When we focus on community in all of the ways that is emblematic, you know, you've got that really strong New York, you know, bootstrap mentality, which is great. And I get a lot from that. I have several friends in New York, et cetera. But like Tandy, I wanted to be away from that. I wanted to include it, but I didn't want to be in the middle of it. And that's why I'm based where I'm based out of. And so I reached out, and people will come to support what I do because they're like, wow, you're here. And we want to support the things that help us in the bigger sense of us.
There's another part of your story that I'm not sure is coming across clearly. You do work, East Haddam Stage Company, is that East Haddam Stage Company, where you take plays to site-specific places.
Yes.
The reason I know this is because I was at Gillette Castle and saw your play.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk about that, because it's not just been Gillette Castle, and you have things in the works where you want to incorporate historic landmarks and theater, because you've seen this connection that you think is obvious, but so for some reason or other the people in charge don't get it.
Yes, and I just did a lengthy presentation about the process by which I got the one-man show launched at Gillette Castle on William Gillette's Japanese valet confidant. We call him a personal assistant these days. And yeah, you have to, Tandy got backed into it. For me, it was more like rolling a big old snowball uphill backwards and in high heels. But I finally got them convinced that there is more here than what they're seeing. This is a state park, which is another entity. You have to, if you're going to partner with anyone, you have to speak their language. And I learned that when I had to do site-specific creation of 2 actors portraying a married couple at Windsor Historical Society. They're Strong Howard House. It has 5 rooms, and they wanted people to be immersed when they walked in there, that they were going back to 1810. So I had to specifically get the actors to share the information that the Historical Society wanted to be shared about the structure and about the contents, but I also wanted them to be, you know, real people. And so they had to learn both sides of that. So it does take a little bit more of a, and you know, it's so old, the out of the box thinking, but you don't just hand an actor a script with what I do and then, you know, tell them blocking over here and then you do that and you're done. This is more of, wow, how do we incorporate the fact that those curtains are something that she made at such and such a time? Well,
in theater, it's called backstory.
It's backstory, exactly.
In any theater project, you have the script, but then you fill it in with backstory so that the actor who's taking on a role has a full history in their head, even if it's not in the words.
I make them do a personality profile. I have them write it all out. And even if, you know, 90% of that is not going to be in the script or in the guidelines or in the improv, they know it and they become it. And that it's immersive for the actors as well. And so at Gillette Castle State Park, for those who don't know, William Gillette was a rock star, Brad Pitt of his day. You know, 3,000 people waiting online to see him.
Fabulously wealthy man. He made a fortune playing Sherlock Holmes.
Yep, that's what he's best known for. So yes, he was a playwright, he was a producer, he was eccentric kind of guy. And so this state park has his house, and it's not run like a historic house. And I've been trying for years to get them to understand that unlike other places, like your pop-up theater, Tandy. Guilford does that here on the shoreline in Connecticut. There's others. They actually do have a truck that is a stage, and they pull it up, and there's the performances, which is fabulous. And yet this guy was an actor, and there was no theater there. So I went up about 12 years ago, and I said, look, give me a try. I will do it at my own dime. I will show you what a great addition the arts and theater are to this state park, irrespective of the fact that this man was a rock star actor
in theater.
In theater,
so
yeah.
there might be a connection between
right?
theater and this man's castle.
Yeah. So maybe. Maybe just a little. So I dug deep into his life, and I wrote a couple pieces that were based on his life leading up to how he became Sherlock Holmes. And then I branched out. And it was so successful, by the way, that the supervisor, the state park ranger, yes, they're park rangers. I work with park rangers, and they don't know from arts. But they saw that people were coming, and they were buying concessions, and they were buying a ticket to tour the house, and they were staying, and they were seeing things because they wanted to come back and see the shows. And so we extended it to our season. We eventually did more weekends, and because it's a state park, we can't charge extra for that. So I had to get sponsorships, hence the partnerships with businesses here in Connecticut. And I make
which are announced in the radio script that
absolutely, exactly. So
the sponsorships, I think you mentioned them 3 times.
Yes, exactly. And we were planning on doing an original piece called Case Closed. And it was going to be launched last summer, and it was going to be full of audience participation.
Well, hold that thought, because I want to go back to Tandy for a second. Tandy, because we didn't really talk about, because you said something, Kandie, that made me want to ask Tandy something. What are the moving parts of what you do? You really didn't talk about your truck. I mean, it's keep on trucking, but it's a truck that converts to a stage, right?
Yes, but I think in terms of your overall topic about community, the issue about partnerships is really critical, and she's been really discussing that. Whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, the partnerships makes an audience appear in how you can do it. I think one of the things that surprised me during the pandemic in terms of the community building aspect and I can go back to your truck specificity, but I think the issue of how we make community as producers, as directors, is not only about the partnerships, but about free. I think the thing that's blown my mind is I've made everything free this year. And I did it because I feel like we all owe each other everything. Where we live, we're in the middle of the fire zones. And last year we were evacuated. And, you know, I often talk now about artists. I'm so grateful for the first responders out here, the fire, the everything that we went through. And I think that artists are the second responders. And it's the artist who comes in after the food, health, and safety issues have been taken care of. And the artist has the possibility of opening up people's hearts, their spirits, giving them the courage to keep moving forward. So the building of community is really a profound part of what we can do as artists. And I know when I first started in the 70s, I wanted everything to be free. And then the reality hit that that can't be. Mm-hmm. But this last year, I've come back to doing everything free. And the community has been supporting us. In a way, I'm going to tell a story about somebody who I saw come in online here, Anina, who Tita asked, who lives between New York and Santa Cruz. And Anina, it was out here seeing some of our truck shows. And she said, you must pass the hat. And I said, no, free is free. If it's free, it should be free. But on her birthday, she went out and just took over the mic from the woman who was singing at the end. And said, you know, it's free out here for all of us, but it costs. Mm-hmm. And by God, this woman, Anina, raised $700 that day for people that were there. But the issue about how do we as artists respond to the depth of our communities,
Mhm.
I really think it's about somehow the partnerships. And what I'm stunned by right now is Free has a generosity that gets brought in.
Right. And I think if we really look at it and communicate well with our communities, they will buy a ticket when it comes time where we have to offer something that isn't going to be free or we don't get that grant. And I think it's because I even had people who last year were like, are you going to do shows? Are you going to do shows? And I couldn't on site. They built a big stage and everything. It's a permanent stage now there for the Haddam Stage Company, and we're in residence there. And I was really, heartfelt emotions were coursing through me when a lot of the people went to our Facebook page that love our shows. And I was like, are you going to do the shows? Are you going to do shows? Are you going to do shows? And we weren't able to because the park itself was open, but none of the staff was there and the house itself was closed down. So we weren't able to do it. So this year, the same thing was happening. Are you going to do the shows? Are you going to do the shows? And the state decided to go ahead and open the park. And so I was able to say to everybody, yes, we're going to do the shows. I didn't have to ask sponsors from the past if they wanted to sponsor us again. They came to me and said, we heard that you're doing these shows again. We want to be in there. And so, Bob, that's why I gave them the shout out because we did a 1945 version of a Sherlock Holmes radio show that I kind of moshed from a number of different scripts. And
I have to tell you, Kandie, for a moment I had to think, was this just part of the script? Were these like period sponsors, or
I love it.
Do they really exist? And then I went, oh, after the second was like, oh, these people really do exist here, don't they?
Yes.
Is it like a flying school?
Yes, learn to fly. Yes,
flying school of all things.
And what's so funny about that is I got more response from the way I wrote the commercial copy because radio shows in the 1930s and 40s were, the Columbia Hour or the, Washington Coffee Hour and all that kind of thing. And so the breaks are in there in the originals. And I listened to enough vintage radio that I went, I can get this lingo down. And to hear you, Bob, say, I wasn't sure if that was really something from then or now is exactly what I was going
There was a moment where we're going, whoa, she wrote commercials into this. Okay. Yes. And it's like, wait, these are actual sponsors.
Yes.
So I want to go back to Free is Free, something that you said, Tandy. We offered what we're doing for free on April 17th, but we also offered people the option of supporting us if they were able to. People who can will. I would never, I don't think anyone would objects to saying pay what you can and free if you can't. Mm-hmm. And it's, our financial health has been astonishing for a pandemic. We've done better in a pandemic than we did pre-pandemic. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't have as many expenses, mm-hmm. But your community wants to be generous. When they can, they will be generous. Yes. I'm in a new situation in my life where my financial situation has changed. I'm giving donations to my favorite not-for-profit companies right and left, and I'm just thrilled to do it. Yeah. So never be ashamed to ask, or never be afraid or hesitant to ask.
There is a fine line, and I've had this conversation several times. There's a fine line, and I've talked to individual actors about this because some organizations that hire people to come in and do programming and presentations for them, if they can get a local hobby person who does it as a hobby, not as a profession, to do it for next to nothing, then they expect you to do it for next to nothing. And so with the caveat, I always say, these are brought to you by the grant or the sponsor or the whatever. That's why they're free, not because they don't cost money to create. And I think if we're very clear about how we communicate that and make the distinction, as I do, that these are professional paid actors. This is a professional theater company. This is what we do for a living. This is what we're able to offer to you for free because of this, that, and the other. You're absolutely right, Bob. They will then, out of nowhere, some lady from a year and a half ago, from 2019, wrote us a $20 check and mailed it in. It was just like so adorable. So you do have to make sure that you don't dilute your brand by, saying, this is not worth paying for. It's worth paying for, but we are finding a way to give it to you for free for now. We'll see what happens, but this is our gift to you now.
And I don't think it dilutes the impact in the community or the I don't think it does. But
well, with the core of your folks that already are part of the people who want to support you, it's drawing in the others to make sure that there's a distinction, to tell them who you are and what you do, and that I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and we really do pay attention to the professionalism of it.
I want to go back to some of the details of the things that you've offered, Tandy, because you've offered a remarkable range of programs to service your community and your artists. Keep on Trucking is just one of the things that you've been doing. Can you tell us a little about
Are you talking about just during the pandemic?
Yeah, during the pandemic. I think the programs that were for the pandemic, they may have been pre-pandemic, but you've been continuing them anyway. Yeah,
no, all of the ones that you and I did a little email about were during the pandemic, and I think the free part has to do with the issue of the pandemic very much right now. And I'd like, before we go to that, the other parts, I think there's something about if you're doing anything in schools, it's really important that you don't, because you can offer something for free, the schools actually then will diss somebody else who has to ask for the money. So we always, when we go into schools, the schools as an institution have to pay because, except for this project that I started this last year called the Kindness Project. And this particular aspect of it, there's a whole series of them, but this one that we just piloted is called an uncompetition. And it's basically asking children or middle school and high school, to look at kindness and how do they feel when they're kind to somebody, when someone else is kind to them, and can they see kindness in the community? And I love this story that there was a 6th grade boy who kind of just put his arms across his chest and said, "That's baloney. There is no kindness in the community. I've never seen it. I'm not doing that part of the essay," and blah, blah, blah. He went on, and he was really, the teacher said this way. But he, on the third, I thought this was going to be a program for 1 week, 5 days. And the purpose was for the children to write these essays, share them with each other, and then have a time where they had to talk to each other about how they want to see a kinder world, and how could what part of the world do they want to help? Is it animals? Is it the ocean? Is it hungry kids? And then they vote, they make a plan, and then we give them a small check to go to a nonprofit that will champion their dreams. And we gave that for free, for sure, because we just wanted to see that. But going back to the boy, he came running into his class week 3, because the teacher did it for 4 weeks and next year wants to do it for the whole year. But this boy came in and said, I just understood that there is kindness in the world. And she said, "Well, describe this to me." He said, "Well, I was playing basketball, and at the end of the game, this guy just gave me the ball." And he said, "What, for me? For keeps? For free?" And his brain as a 6th grader, it was the first time that he ever saw and looked actively about you can gift something. And I know that kid's going to be changed forever, so hey, that's what I'm into right now. How do we
and that is part of your community. Speaking to the theme here is like that boy who experienced the thing that you guys brought to him. he is now part of your community. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the bigger element of it. It's not just drawing people to us who are like-minded, or drawing people to us because they already, you know, are rah. It's about, and it's not just like expanding your community randomly. It's that by doing what you do, you are bringing community to you and sharing your community with them. And
we really didn't say enough about Keep on Trucking, Tandy, because I want to make sure, I really want to make sure that people understand this. You did this because you felt that your audience was starved for entertainment. You put this together not only to give the artists themselves something to do and paid work, but because you felt that your community needed something, needed art of some sort. So,
well, I'm kind of terrible as an audience member, because I find it very difficult to watch theater on screen or watch dance on screen. I just, I can't do it. I try as much as I want to. And so I just felt that there is something transcendent about, as we all know, about that process of being an audience member, where you become part of a mystical, larger group of, that you hear people laughing together. You're part of that laughter. You're part of the emotional fabric that goes way beyond yourself. And so I felt in this fear that everybody has to be near each other, that if we could do it outside in large enough places, that everybody could choose their own distances rather than being pushed up against each other in a room. And so this has been a very great aspect of just watching the community come together and find their heart.
So Tandy, Anina says, I live in Santa Cruz, part of Tandy's community. Her Keep on Trucking events were so very meaningful to everyone who attended. They were a gift to all of us. People who were moved to tears who attended the first two. Tell us a little bit about what you brought to them. What were these events?
You know, I thought about dance, but it's too hard on a truck where the angle is funny and it's, you know, it's
dangerous.
It's, yeah, all of that. And so, you know, I've spent a lifetime working with Bobby McFerrin, and that connected me in with many different musicians, as well as my husband, who's a composer. And so I knew many musicians who I could easily say, okay, as a solo act, you can make music for everybody, and we don't have to worry about your health, and you can be on this truck separated so you'll stay safe. And or if you're living in a pod, and there were a couple of people who were that way, so they came together. Keith Terry, who's a wonderful artist, and his wife performed together. Great Brazilian singer Claudia Villela came with Ricardo Peixoto. I mean, it was mostly musicians, and I brought in a wonderful clown magician, and then two other circus people shows that could work perfectly outside, and it would really unite the children, and also for people to laugh together is a pretty great gift. Yeah. And so everybody was
you curated a series of presentations based on the resources that you knew were at your disposal, which is basically how I created True.
That's it. Yeah. Bravo, can you talk about that?
It's also how I cook. I look in the refrigerator and I see what I have.
Yes.
So, and Kandie will tell you that I do a pretty good job with that too.
Oh yes, absolutely. I hope the most.
She came to a luncheon that I catered.
Best salmon patty I've had in a while.
Okay, so there were six. I remember 6 programs. Just a little sentence or two about each of them. You talked about Keep on Trucking. You talk about the school.
Oh, this is a cool one. This is called Brain Boosts. And I had this image when I was hearing people having to be by their kid's side. You know, I was thinking, God, if you were a parent who hated math and your kid hates math and the teacher's hates math or is not really great at it. And by the way, she's been teaching for 4 hours on Zoom that day and she's exhausted. I imagined this scenario and I was thinking, the teacher wants to open the window and scream. The parent wants to open up the cabinet and have a shot of vodka, and the kid just wants to have fun. And yet this is all we could do for education. So I came up with this idea, and I wrote to artists that I knew all across the country and said, could you make me a video between 5 and 10 minutes of a wow moment, an artistic recess in which the children are going to learn, but they're going to just go, wow, this is fun, and kind of just shake up their brains and let them feel okay about being a kid and learning and Zoom and all of this. I got Tom Noddy, who is like the world's best bubble blower.
Oh, I beg to differ. My husband learned everything he knows from Tom Noddy. He's a bubbleologist, my husband is.
I knew that was coming.
From Tom Noddy.
Yes.
So he's the granddaddy of bubble blowing.
He's the granddaddy, yeah.
And so he did one for us, and some jugglers did ones of asking the children to go get kitchen towels or pillows, whatever they had, because we really have been working in low income. And then there was one beautiful actor who's worked with me in a show that's about what people think happens after we die, called Hereafter Here, a self-guided tour of eternity.
Oh, wow.
And this one actor I adored, and I knew he was struggling financially. So I called him up and I said, Salvador, let's do a theater one. And he said, I don't want to do a theater one. I said, okay, but I have money I want to pay you. So let's dream something up. And I said, I was teaching at the University of California for a while, and I had at least 4 adult university students who, when I asked them to write a letter to their favorite teacher and tell them what they learned from them, they didn't know how to address a letter. I was stunned. And so I said, Salvador, do a little video on how to write a letter. It is so charming. He goes into the history. You never see his face. Just
does he at least start by explaining to people in this new world what a letter is?
Well, but he goes back to papyrus and all the different kinds that you could make ceramic letters and hieroglyphics. I mean, it's just fabulous what he did. And it ends by, okay, now let's write this letter, dear grandma. And he said, here's where you put the love Tandy at the bottom. I mean, it's just charming. But all of these were ways, and teachers wrote me back. We gave them to 18,000 children. And the teachers just said, oh my God, thank you. It's helping me get through my Zoom day. I'm putting them on for the kids.
And your magic carpet, which you took into schools, was seen by 3,600 kids.
Yep, that was huge. We've for 20 years been doing a program in the schools where we have many beautiful local living artists who were born someplace else. And they, they do feel marginalized, but many of them have said, oh my God, I feel like I'm a rock star now because of how the children are responding to the work. But so it's a huge program that goes out, and we get to hire all these wonderful world artists. And then I partnered with somebody who used to work for me, and she's now with another company. And so we did the whole thing online. And, it's painful because all the dancers and the musicians have masks on because it was super COVID right then. And we had to adhere to everything, even though it was video. And it's weird to see a dancer with a mask on.
A very specific question that I forgot to ask you. And Keep on Trucking, when you brought your show around to different audiences, first of all, how big were the audiences, and were there any protocols in place? Were they masked? Were they socially distanced?
Yeah.
How did you do it?
We had a printed sign that said, please take care of each other, keep your distance, keep your mask on, or the truck will move on. Minor threat.
That's clear.
And then actually when California, the mask mandate was lifted, we were at an audience, and a friend of mine, a donor of the company and friend, came up to, and he's a lawyer, and he said, why do you still have that thing up there? Why are you still, I said, oh, Peter, I want to err on the side of safety. So you are welcome to go sit over there without your mask and your wife, but we're still keeping the sign up. Mm-hmm. So we did keep the protocol up. We didn't the last time we went out for one, but I noticed that still a lot of people were masked, and I usually wear a mask just to model it.
Yeah, and she's making a good point about being clear about where you stand. I will tell you, my audiences had a level of comfort, even though it was outdoors. They had a level of comfort because I made the announcement in the program, on all of our social media and everything, on the website, everything, that all of the people who were working for and with the Haddam Stage Company were all vaccinated. I made that mandatory. I can do that because it's my company. So I made it mandatory. And so they knew when they were coming into the presence of the actors, even though it's an open air and all of that, they had a comfort level that I sensed, I felt. And I could watch them because they're walking through the park and they're avoiding people and they're avoiding people and they're avoiding people, whether they had masks on or not. But they actually did, once they went through our arch and came down to be with us, they had a comfort level. It's almost physically like I saw their shoulders relax. And they did, like you said, stay in there, they were little pods, but they were willing to be there because they figured if I can be in a place where at least the people who don't wear masks are vaccinated, I feel much more comfortable being in this space. And so that going forward with the site-specific stuff that I'm doing, I'm waiting to get a signed contract for one. And part of what my non-negotiable is that everybody that I hire to be part of this production must be vaccinated. And if a lot more people would understand the negative impact of the performing arts all across the board, of non-vaccinated people, it's I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but this is our community, and we need to be clearer with the outside folks who want to come into this community that we have a high respect for what we do, and we can't do what we do if you are being irresponsible with yourself. And that is the key thing that I'm trying not to be forceful about, but very clear about. And even though I'm totally vaccinated 5 times over, when I go out, I'm still masked, and I always wear a button that says I've been vaccinated. Not because I don't want people to be concerned about me, it's because I want to be the living embodiment of supporting my community, my performance artists, colleagues, peers, friends who aren't able to do what they can do, as Bob said, because now, even though we were going to get ready to roll out in September, now everyone's having to go backwards. And it's because people are not being responsible.
And there are actually more letters in the Greek alphabet.
Oh,
just saying. Just
ouch.
saying. So, we've been chatting for about an hour, and I want to make sure that everybody who's in the audience, who's with us today, where are these noises coming from? Anyway, I want to make sure that you know how to raise your hand virtually or ask a question in the chat. Be part of this. I think we want to sort of wrap up quickly because I don't want to impose on Tandy and Kandie's time too much. But if you have questions, we covered a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of area, and a lot of it is unknown to many of us. So please, if you have questions and need clarifications, give me a virtual hand raise. That's in your, if you go at the bottom, you'll see something called reactions. Open up your reactions window and you'll see a virtual hand raise. Put on your audio and just ask a question if you like.
You can fold it up.
It's not dry.
Oh.
Well, that's Gene Richards. So let's see where.
Oh no, sorry. I'm just listening in.
Oh, hi. Well, hi.
Hi. I didn't know you could hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay.
So Larry, let's start with Larry. Larry Daggett has a question. And feel free to come in the room.
I have a question for Kandie. Hi, you said you mentioned you know how to apply for arts and humanities grants. you also mentioned that, of course, you reach out to a particular venue if you think it's applicable to your show. But is there a place that you go to, like Fractured Atlas or someplace for arts and humanities grants? You see a list of them, then you apply for them, or do you just think of what would be appropriate in your head and then use that as the starting point?
I'm always queued in, once a month at least. I queue into my contacts at the Humanities and the Office of the Arts. It really behooves anyone who wants to really get these partnerships on a very strong ground. I send an email. Scott Wand is my connection at the Humanities. I wrote him 2 days ago about this upcoming Jane Austen program that I want to do with the Jane Austen Society. And I said, what grants are currently available from the Humanities within a certain time, et cetera, et cetera.
I think a lot of us aren't even aware that there is some sort of Office of the Humanities.
Yes, exactly. And that is why it is an untapped source of wonderful funding available to artists, and they just don't know that, because we sometimes feel like we're so isolated. Artists can only apply for art.
Is it state level, or is this?
It is, but a lot of times your state humanities council and they get money from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So there are other grants through the Humanities that you can apply for that are on a national level. The ones that I tend to want to apply for are smaller ones that are managed and administered through the state entity.
Although we're in New York and you're in Connecticut, do you have could you put that in the chat, the address for how we could contact that?
Basically, Larry, I just Googled New York State Humanities Grants, and a whole thing comes up. New York State Humanities Grants. That's all you have to just Google it.
Okay.
If you go to any large foundation, they usually have the foundation library there that you can search through. There's something called Grant Station that has an annual fee of about 150, 160 bucks that will say you can go in and find out which area that you can plug into. And then there's a really simple one called Grant Gopher. That's an email that comes out. And actually, I kind of love the spirit of these people.
Yeah.
And there's a free version of it. And you can go in search by state as well as by subject.
No, I saw 3 hands up. Now I only see Larry and Tita. Yeah. Somebody else had the hand up. But Tita, do you want to come in and ask your question?
Yes. I love the conversation about community and giving. And what I've enjoyed in COVID times is if I watch a reading on Zoom, the audience talks afterwards. You have interviews, you see each other's faces, not the back of your heads and your ears. And I'm curious, both of you, how, if we go back straight to regular in-person theater and dance, whatever, if you have ideas about how to keep that sense of humanity and community that you're getting when you take your truck around or when you open up an outdoor stage and involve people. So just any ideas you have based on what you have done in the past or are thinking about or whatever.
Thank you, Tita. I know for myself that I feel like I'm in some kind of dark alchemy going on. And I have no idea what's going to take place during this strange era that we're in, because partly I feel like it is going to last a very long time. And I feel that there's some alchemical shift going on as to what I want to be doing post-COVID.
But you're saying the post-COVID is maybe a ways off.
Oh, I think yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to be a glass half empty person. I want to be hopeful, but I also have to be realistic. And my heart got dashed 5 times last year as we kept thinking it was going to end and change and just the roller coaster we've all been on.
Right.
And so going forward, one of my key things that I'm going to be looking to do is more site specific, not creating something that is rigid in structure that can only play a place that has such and such a lighting or such and such. A total movable feast, as in we will adapt this to that space. And identifying those spaces, I have already started to specifically identify those spaces. And my theater company is on the roster of the New England Foundation for the Arts. So if a venue or a site or a presenting house or a school or a park and rec that wants a truck that comes up and does performances during the summer, they can go there to the New England Foundation for the Arts, and they can see on the roster who does what. Are they teaching artists? Are they blah, blah, blah? You can fill all these stuff in. And they can apply for grants to bring us in because they are a not-for-profit. So there's a lot of sources out there that I have garnered over these years that have helped in my standard theater presentations. And now I'm shifting that visual to, okay, let me see, I can do this not only in a park, I can do it side of a barn, I can do it halfway in a barn, halfway out of a barn, if you've got a tent over the audience. And I have heard more and more that audiences, and I was just at an outdoor performance by TheaterWorks in Hartford, Walden, and they took their entire production and they built it outside.
So to translate this for New Yorkers,
yes,
this means street theater and also site specific,
yes,
and what they call window theater.
Yes, that's another one. If you can get the New York version of a cul-de-sac. Chicago is doing this. There's some great stuff going on in Chicago. They just did part of the Tennessee Williams Festival, and they did it in the alley adjacent to a parking lot of the apartment building that Tennessee Williams used to live in. And they did the entire thing outside of the apartment building.
I read about that.
Yeah, it was fabulous. It was fabulous. So going forward, for those of us like you, Tandy, there are so many things that do not translate if they are not created for the virtual world. Things that are videotaped for the virtual world, it would be really great if we could have those same kind of things translated to, okay, this isn't going to work good virtually. It's not conducive to that, but how can it work and make it live theater? And the people in Chicago were actually being interviewed, and they said, I'll come out here in December. I don't care how cold it is. This is the kind of thing I want to see. So those are the kinds of things that New Yorkers or people in the Adirondacks or out in Santa Cruz or wherever, I think that's one of the ways that we can get back live theater in front of an audience and give them something that they want, because they want to give it to. They want to come and they want to support.
Vinny Melly has a hand up. So Vinny, you can, everybody, you can all turn your videos on and come in. We won't bite. You can join us. We can't bite. It's virtual.
Bob, I can speak, but I think you have to start my video, please.
Okay, so let me find you.
But I can talk. I just wanted to ask the project. Oh, here we go. The project that I'm working on that's outside site specific. I'm very excited about what you two were talking about, and yeah, I want to get out there, and that sounds great. This piece has more of a start and an end. I just wondered if you had any advice or tips. It's not like a concert where people can come and go, and I mean they could enjoy the songs, but I would like them to understand what's going on.
I think a relevant question would be what we think a reasonable running time would be where you can maintain an audience outside. I know Kandie's answer. Kandie's answer is a firm 30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes, 45 at the outset. And I don't do drive-by, not in the way that the truck thing. I don't do drive-by as in, if you're coming to see the show, you're going to come and see the show. You're not fading in and out. One of the reasons I do, really character-driven storytelling stuff is to engage people beginning, middle, end, like you're saying. And so, yes, they know that they're coming to see a staged performance, whether there's actually a stage or whether it's in the yard or whether it's, you know, up on a wall or whatever. They know that they're coming to see something from beginning, middle, end, not the drive-by performance of, you know, the state fair. So 30 minutes is what we have discovered works really best in the summer because people don't want to sit that long in the heat. 45 minutes tops in other venues. And unless you have, I did something called plays and poetry, 10-minute plays interspersed with poetry written by Connecticut poets. And these are performance poems. And so I hired actors to perform the poems, and we do 2 or 3 poems and then 2 or 3 plays, etc. And where there were natural breaks in themes or whatever, we would just have like a stand up and you know, wiggle, get a you know, take down your water, whatever, you know, and sit back down. And in lieu of what is a structured intermission, it just gives people a little, you know, stand up, you know, blow on your hands if you're cold, or, you know, dance around or whatever, and then sit back down and continue to enjoy. And we encourage people to bring their own chairs.
And Vinny, I think that the most important thing is to have a very specific start time and advertise how long it's going to be. And maybe you have a little punctuation mark at the end of whether it's something that's food, it's shared, it's something that they know this is going to be their closure. And they're not sitting or stuck.
All right, thank you. In Green Bay, they'll sit in the snow for 3 hours to watch a football game. So they can sit through theater for 40 minutes. Thank you.
Exactly. And that's my analogy constantly. You do it for sports.
Thanks.
So anybody else want to have a question or a comment or something? Or do you want, we can go into breakout rooms now. I can also say my thank yous to Kandie, Carle, and Tandy Beal for being with me today, and sharing their experiences and their.
You're welcome.
Their
You're welcome. It's important that we have these discussions and that we learn from each other and support each other, because we need to. We're not going to stop creating our art. We just can't. I cannot see a world without what we do in it, and so we have to find ways of continuing to do it. That are going to be not only the best for us creatively, but also for our audiences.